both in Washington and in South Florida. We've seen the damage they've done, but we've also seen what the pressure can do to hold them accountable. That's what you're doing in the streets. Take Social Security. Nearly 160,000 Floridians in my district alone depend on Social Security. But Elon and Doge want to make it harder for those people to access the benefits they've earned. They tried to close Social Security offices. They've cut the Social Security phone line. That's unacceptable. And when we brought that issue to the forefront and held them accountable, they backed off. You'd think it should be easy to say that we should protect Social Security from cuts. The same goes for Medicare and Medicaid. But when I proposed an amendment to Republicans in the government funding bill to say that we wouldn't give the president any authority to reduce funding for Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, they blocked my amendment. And that's why I voted against the continuing resolution many months ago. I was one of the first Democrats to come out against it. Now they're even more upfront about wanting to cut, those and other government programs. I mean, this week, committee across Congress, they're meeting. Republicans want to finalize their disastrous budget bill. It's called the reconciliation bill. You've probably been reading about it. This bill is wrong for Florida. It's wrong for the country. It's why I, again, was one of the first Democrats to come out against it. And they know it, too. That's why they're holding hearings in the dead of night. So what's in this budget bill to start? Well, at least there's $800 billion of cuts to Medicaid. There's $230 billion in cuts to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's food for the poor. That helps put food on their table. In our district alone, more than 90,000 residents rely on Medicaid for life-saving health care, and more than 60,000 in our district rely on SNAP to feed their families. Nationally, their cuts could strip health care from 13.7 million Americans. And what's ironic is that these cuts are also going to hurt red states. It's going to hurt their own constituents. But again, my colleagues and I are doing what we can to demand that the House Republicans pledge to protect these programs. We're working to force up and down votes. In fact, when I was in rules just now, there were 500 plus amendments that we filed to point this out. But we want to demand votes from cutting, Medicaid and SNAP benefits or using it to remove individuals from these programs. But again, House Republicans, my colleagues across the aisle, are refusing to act in favor of working families and take, it should be easy. Give us a straightforward vote rather than this giant reconciliation bill. Unfortunately, that's not all that's in this budget framework is targeting. It's also targeting Pell Grants, Head Start, school lunch, and more, all to pay for tax giveaways to Elon Musk and his friends. They're showing whose side they're on, and it's not ours. Listen, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Those are great, but that's not what's in this bill. That means that at all times when American families are rightfully demanding lower costs, my colleagues are trying to take away these critical programs to make the rich richer. And then we got the tariffs. Oh, my God, what a disaster the tariffs have been for working families, for Main Street. And we've seen these policies, what they're going to do, what they're doing to the economy, what they're doing to the bond market. Stock market went down 800 points today because of that. Since the administration's tariff announcement, the recession indexes are higher. Americans' accounts, their retirement accounts have dropped. And that doesn't even account for the news last week when Moody's downgraded the United States credit rating from AAA. You know why? Because this Republican bill is actually going to add $3.5 trillion to the debt that our kids and our grandkids are being saddled with. Today, Americans face an average effective tariff rate of 17.8%. You've seen Target and Walmart talk about prices going up. It's dented household annual purchasing power by $2,800. In a country where kids grow up inspired by the American dream, they're being told to expect fewer toys and fewer pencils and can't watch Elmo on PBS. It's not right for families, for businesses, or for our national and economic security. And it's why we have to stop the harmful tariffs. So I'm glad the president has rolled those back a little bit. We got to continue to roll them back. They've been extremely harmful. You know what else is harmful? The uncertainty. The constant chaos is harming our global leadership. I've served on the House Foreign Affairs Committee since I arrived here in Congress, and I've seen firsthand the importance of maintaining our voice around the world and supporting our allies. That means standing up for Ukraine as it defends itself from Russia's deadly and unprovoked invasion. It means speaking up for Israel's right to self-defense and blocking Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon and more of a foothold in the region. It means supporting Taiwan against threats from China, ensuring that Americans remain the leader of the free world. And as threats continue to grow around the globe, it's more important than ever that America and its allies join together to defend democracy and stand up to authoritarianism and stand up to China. Every time we withdraw from the world, China comes in to fill that role. My other committee assignment this Congress is a new one. In January, I was selected to go from the House Oversight Committee, where I used to go against my friend James Comer, miss him. But now I'm on the Judiciary Committee. It's an important assignment for our community, giving me the chance to move the ball forward, preventing school violence, supporting our law enforcement, and boosting public safety, which is important to my district. It's also been a critical forum as of late for protecting our judicial branch of the government from unjustifiable attacks. My colleagues across the aisle are now going after the judiciary because they don't like the decisions. They disagree with the decisions the judges are making. You didn't see that in the last administration where judges would rule against the Biden administration. It's unacceptable. It takes aim at our very system of democracy, a separation of powers, and it's something that we have to constantly push back against. By putting our independent judiciary at risk, people who claim to speak for the rule of law are instead threatening to undermine it. Now, before I get to some of your questions, the final area I want to touch on this is hurricane season. Hurricane season is right around the corner. As I mentioned, as you know, I was the emergency management director here in Florida from 2019 to 2021. I led our state through hurricanes, the COVID-19, and other disasters that touched our state. And from South Florida all the way to the Panhandle, I saw firsthand how important emergency preparedness was then. And it hasn't gotten any less important now. We're less than 2 weeks away. And I encourage all of you to create a disaster plan, assemble a disaster kit, track your home's evacuation zone. Florida calls it know your home, know your zone. Make sure you have the supplies that you need. And always be prepared, stay prepared. They say to have 7 days of supplies. We changed that from 3 days to 7 days when I was the director. Unfortunately, people here in Washington don't get the importance of disaster readiness. Instead of delivering FEMA the resources it needs and supports, officials in the Trump administration are trying to turn FEMA into the Newark airport. Hundreds of disaster relief fund awards in Florida have been frozen in violation of the Stafford Act, and some 2,000 of FEMA's 6,100 employees are in the process of being pushed out. That's not going to get Florida what we need when disaster strikes, and it's not going to make emergency management more efficient. Leaning on my background as the only emergency management director here in Congress, I've been pushing my colleagues in the administration to save FEMA through common sense reforms. We can organize it better, we can get money out faster, and we can make disaster response more efficient for Florida families and small businesses. And I'll work with the administration if they want to make reforms to FEMA. There's definitely areas we can improve. And we've made some progress with a bill that I have to reorganize FEMA, currently making its way through the House of Representatives. But we still have ways to go to ensure this administration prioritizes emergency management when the skies are blue, just as when the skies are gray. And Florida has one of the best emergency managements in the country, but it still needs resources from the federal government. So yes, look, there's a lot of damage and chaos coming out of Washington these days, but we're fighting back every day, and we need your help to stay united against these threats. Together, we can continue to put much needed pressure against these policies to ensure we're staying focused on what matters, lowering the cost for Americans, protecting the programs Floridians rely on, standing up to extremism, and supporting our allies around the world. I know a lot of you have questions, and I want to get to as many of those as possible. So I'm going to stop here. I want to thank you all who have submitted questions, and thanks to you again for tuning in tonight. And I'll turn it over to the moderator to kick us off with the first couple of questions.
Thanks, Congressman. We'll now move to some questions from your constituents. As the Congressman referenced, we've received hundreds of questions in advance of this town hall. While we won't be able to get to all of them, we'll try to answer as many as we can. Thank you to all of you who sent them in. We also recognize that many of you may have political or electoral questions. Unfortunately, House rules prohibit us from taking questions about campaign politics at official events like this one. If you submit a follow-up, we recommend focusing it on specific policies coming out of Washington and their implications on your family, South Florida, or the nation. Turning to our first question, we'll continue our conversation with a question from Dave in Fort Lauderdale. Dave asks, can Congressman oops, I'm so sorry. That was the wrong question. We are going with a question from Elise from Coral Springs. Elise is familiar with your last job, head of Florida's Division of Emergency Management, and is worried about the upcoming hurricane season like many of us are. Elise asks, As the former director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management, how concerned are you about FEMA's statement last week regarding their lack of hurricane preparedness and the ability of the state to take over the vacuum created by the current administration?
Yeah, thank you, Elise, for the question. So I'm deeply concerned about the situation at FEMA. Let me say a couple of things. So first of all, all grants right now are paused. The Secretary of Homeland has paused all grants. She has no authority to do that under Homeland, under the Homeland bill that was passed after Katrina, or the Stafford Act. No ability to pause any grants whatsoever. In fact, it's a direct violation of those. And what happens when grants are paused? That means money's not getting reimbursed. That means, towns are not going to be ready. Cities, counties, especially fiscally constrained areas, are not going to be ready to spend the money they need to spend to respond and clean up after a hurricane. It also means that, the state of Florida, who again has a great emergency management department, one of the best in the country, if not the best, and has resources to get us out of the gate, they're going to be concerned about whether they're going to be reimbursed. Are they going to get a pre-landfall declaration, which allows resources to move, ice, water, power generation, tarps, meals ready to eat, things of that nature? Bring in those resources, pre-position them. I'm concerned. I'm glad that FEMA at least was honest that they're not ready. But look, FEMA needed reform. The president was right about that. The FEMA needed reform. The emergency management industry has known that for a long period of time. But they took something that needed help and they've completely broken it. And that's what the secretary has done. And so, look, I'm hopeful that we don't get a big storm. Florida could use a break, obviously, from the hurricanes we've seen: Ian, Helene, Milton. But I'm deeply worried about FEMA's ability to respond. I'm worried about it slowing down the emergency management response in general. And so, what you can do is make sure you have your plans in place. Remember, listen to evacuation orders. Remember, while we care about the wind, water, if you live along the coast, know your home, know your zone. You don't have to go hundreds of miles. Just go to a friend's house, go inland. We have pet shelters. That was my bill when I was in the State House. We mandated pet shelters in every county. So, look, I'm hoping that FEMA figures it out between now and then, but obviously I'm worried. They got rid of 30% of the staff. A lot of people, senior folks, that have that experience. You got regional offices, that are empty, and they're talking about cutting preparedness grants, for future events. And so, Kevin Guthrie is the emergency management director in Florida. He's got a great program there. I have my utmost faith in Kevin and them. And so, they'll pull through, but I can tell you the folks at Homeland are not doing us any favors.
Thank you, Congressman. We are now moving to a question from Jim from Pompano Beach. Jim writes, I worked for 30 years at NOAA, which is now imperiled by staffing and funding cuts. Who is going to do the hurricane and tornado forecasting? Who is going to monitor our oceans like NOAA does?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for that question. It goes right back to emergency management. I mean, here's what I would say. I'm going to put them together. The cuts to NOAA, which were literally forecast in Project 2025, everything that they've done in NOAA was literally written in Project 2025 chapter and verse. And that's because they want to privatize the agency. They want us to get our weather and our hurricane forecast from a private company rather than the government. But looping that into hurricane season real quick, I'm deeply worried about the staffing shortages. They've already been reported about when these tornadoes just hit, that there weren't enough people in the offices to deal with them. I'm worried about the hurricane tracks, making sure we know the track, the speed of the hurricane, making sure the intensity of the hurricane. I'm worried about that. And I'm worried about the hurricane hunters, which give us real live information. I mean, when I was the director of emergency management, I relied on that. I'll give you a clear example. Hurricane Dorian. Okay, when Hurricane Dorian was headed towards Florida, remember that was the hurricane in 2019 that decimated the Bahamas. And NOAA said to us, this hurricane is going to come within 75 miles of Florida. It's going to go to 0 miles per hour. It's going to stop for 2 days, and it's going to make a direct turn 90 degrees north. I said to the folks at NOAA that's never happened. We've never seen a hurricane just dead stop for 2 days and take a 90-degree turn. And we relied on that forecast. Had we not had the right information, we wouldn't have been prepared. Had that hurricane buzzsaw across Florida. They nailed that forecast and they saved a lot of people. And so again, look, this is not efficient. They've not made FEMA more efficient. They've not made NOAA more efficient. Where's the efficiency? They've just done cuts and gut the agency. And so look, there's nothing wrong with trying to save money. We got to save money. We can do that. But the idea of saving money was to do it and make things more efficient. And they didn't do that at FEMA, and they've most certainly not done that at NOAA.
Thank you, Congressman. The next question is coming from Heather from Parkland. Heather writes in, today is the 27th anniversary of the Thurston High School shooting, where a school shooter used multiple weapons, including an unsecured firearm he took from his father. 20 years later, my two daughters would know what it's like to run and hide from their own school shooter at your alma mater, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. I have since learned that 3/4 of school shooters get their firearms from home or the home of a loved one where gun owners with children in the home have not properly secured their firearms. In many other instances, innocent children like Ethan Song are killed in unintentional shootings when minors find weapons that are not securely stored. What is being done to pass legislation like Ethan's Law that promotes safe storage of firearms and holds gun owners accountable when tragedy strikes as a result of their negligence? Also, what other federal legislation can be passed to make our schools safer?
So thank you for the question. Obviously, for the folks watching at home and for myself and for the community of Parkland and the broader area, this hits home from the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, where I went to high school. I'm a co-sponsor of Ethan's Law. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Bipartisan School Safety Caucus, and I'm doing everything I can to try to get these bills heard. There's no reason why we're not doing stuff on school safety, more stuff on school safety up here in Congress, but none of the bills are moving. And I'm on, the Eagles Act. I'm on all sorts. I'm on Alyssa's Law. I'm on all sorts of different bills, but we can't. My Republican colleagues won't hear these bills just on school safety, not even on guns, just on school safety. They won't hear the bills. As you know, after the Marjory Stoneman Douglas school shooting, I passed the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, which was really the largest gun safety, school safety package passed in the country, let alone in Florida's history at the time. Raised the age to buy a gun to 21, 3-day waiting periods, red flag laws. Those red flag laws have been used 20,000 times since we put those in place. Hundreds of millions of dollars for school safety, for mental health, and for SROs. And the legislature's gone back each year to strengthen that. Look, we saw what happened just at FSU just a couple of weeks ago, where a student had access to his mom's gun and where safe storage would have been helpful. And then obviously we have illegal guns, hundreds of thousands of them that are out there that aren't registered. And so look, Congress should pass Ethan's Law. Congress should do more, no question about it. Yes, there's vast disagreement on gun policy up here, but there should be bipartisan agreement on school safety, and yet not a single one of those bills that are good, that would make our kids safer, that would mitigate problems at schools, that would harden our facilities, that would help with training, that would help with fix communication issues. None of that is moving in this Congress.
Thank you, Congressman. The next question comes from Dan in Fort Lauderdale. Dan asks, the business community has done its best to strive towards productivity despite rising inflation, higher interest costs, fierce talent competition, and a host of other issues, most of which are beyond our control. The more Congress and the administration disrupt the free enterprise system, jobs are lost, small businesses suffer or shutter, and the level of uncertainty slows growth. How can we work with you to ensure the free enterprise system is able to operate with certainty and stability?
Yeah, look, this is an issue that has dramatic bipartisan concern. Even folks that voted for the president did not expect the president to come in and cause this amount of chaos. Think about it. We tariffed friend and foe alike. We didn't do reciprocal tariffs. We tariffed people at higher rates. We tariffed the penguins, Antarctica, and it caused mass confusion. Then we had basically an embargo with China. And what's unfortunate is there's a missed opportunity here. There is a bipartisan group up here that want to have a better policy against China. We view them as a threat, which is why there was a bipartisan committee on China that I voted for. Had the president come to Congress and said, help us get into a better position with negotiating with China, he would have Democrats and Republicans with him. But they didn't do that. They put an embargo on China, and it led nowhere. I mean, we heard that there's going to be 200 deals. Of course, there aren't 200 countries, and so far we got an outline of a deal with the British, which you wouldn't have thought that we needed a deal with the British, but here we are. And so, look, there's been a lot of talk about the damage to the stock market and to seniors and to their retirement accounts, but Main Street is hurting. I have people calling me all the time about how their businesses are in big trouble. You saw Target and Walmart obviously talking about prices going up. We've seen, egg prices, going up. These are things that the president ran on and said he was going to help the American people. Inflation has not eased either. So now you have inflation and you have the tariff problem. So what can you do? That was the question. What can you do? I'm pointing out, the problems. First, let me say I'm glad the president's starting to roll this back. I'm glad that he's rolling it back because it's not working. The idea was that they were going to, try to get billions of dollars through tariffs to pay for the reconciliation bill. That didn't happen. It's still going to add $3.5 trillion to the debt. And they were going to try to get more money to try to offset, our trade disparity, and that hasn't happened either. But what can you do? What you can do is you can reach out to my colleagues across the aisle. Let them hear it. This is an issue where my Republican colleagues, hearing from folks that think like them, know that what they've done on tariffs is hurting Main Street. It's why you've seen Republicans in the House and the Senate put legislation forward limiting the president's authority on tariffs. In fact, that used to be reserved for Congress until this Congress gave that authority to the president. So look, I'm all for trying to get better deals, but I'm not for taking the American economy hostage and hurting people's livelihoods while they do that. So reach out to my colleagues across the aisle, talk to them, right? Go to these rallies that are happening in the district and other places. Let's organize. Let's get people engaged.
Thank you, Congressman. The next question comes from Karen, who has been a resident of Deerfield Beach for more than 15 years. Seniors paid into Social Security their whole lives, and yet it seems that people in Washington are always threatening these benefits. You've said that you'll always stand up for their access to Social Security, but Karen wants to learn more about the importance of keeping these programs around. She specifically wrote in and asked, do you think I will have Social Security benefits in 15 years when I am finally able to retire?
Yeah, that's a good question, Karen. I'm going to tell you yes. I think there's dramatic bipartisan support up here for Social Security. Yes, there are Republicans that want to cut Social Security, there's no doubt. And look, I'm sure the program could use reform, and there may be reforms that you deal with. We could see at some point, changes in the program for, the much younger who hasn't yet started paying into Social Security. But for people like yourself who are paying into it, who are, almost, the age to get your benefits, I think you'll have Social Security. I do think there's a vast agreement there from, 2/3 of my colleagues across the aisle. Democrats for sure, but 2/3 of Republicans, I don't think are going to take that social safety net, the promise that we made. Now, look, I've been working day and night on this because Elon's crew was coming for Social Security, and they were coming for the phone line that we call when, our residents can't get Social Security. It's one of the things my office works on the most is getting those Social Security benefits. When people move or veterans, aren't getting their checks in the mail, we make those calls. They were going to take that phone line away and push everyone to the computer. Because, as for my seniors out there, that would have been great for you, having to be stuck on a computer for hours trying to get your Social Security benefits. Thankfully, because we pushed them and I organized a significant letter, we were able to get Elon to back off on that, and they were keeping the phone line. And so, yeah, Karen, the chaos that they're causing breeds a lot of anxiety. I totally get it, but I think you'll be able to, you'll have your Social Security benefits.
Thank you, Congressman. The next question comes from Eric in Fort Lauderdale, and this is along a similar vein. We've spoken a lot tonight about the Medicaid cuts facing Americans should Republicans' budget bill go through. This bill cuts hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid. There are also a lot of concerns about protecting Medicare and the life-saving health care it offers seniors. Eric from Fort Lauderdale wrote in asking, millions risk losing health care if Medicare and Medicaid face cuts. What actions are you taking to protect these critical programs that Floridians rely on?
Yeah, well, obviously, I talked about that a little bit in my opening. Almost $1 trillion are proposed in the House reconciliation bill to cut Medicaid, taking money from the bottom 10% to give it to the top 10%. I thought my Republican colleagues were against the redistribution of wealth, but that's what they're doing here. And I'm not against tax cuts, right? Tax cuts, the no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, those are great targeted tax cuts that we could get down to people at the lower level. But the idea of taking people's health care away is completely, I can't believe we are here. What's most interesting about that is President Trump has said no cuts to Medicaid. That's what he said, no cuts to Medicaid. And yet House Republicans didn't listen. They're bringing almost $1 trillion of cuts to Medicaid. And so, look, right now, we're trying to improve that bill. That's what I was doing in the Rules Committee just now before this started. The Republicans don't have a bill yet to get through rules, but they might in the middle of the night tonight. We might be voting on something. It's super unclear. You got the Freedom Caucus, fighting with the moderates, but 90,000 people in this district rely on Medicare. 60,000 rely on Medicaid. It's something that I have been fighting every single solitary day. It was why I was the first Democrat to come out against the continuing resolution that every Democrat but one voted against, leading the charge on that because it was clear what they are doing. By the way, there are cuts we can make in government. There is waste, fraud, and abuse that we can find, but that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're taking health care away from people.
Thank you. Now that we've gotten through a couple very, very important questions, we want to remind viewers that they can learn more about your work on this and other issues by following your social media or subscribing to your email newsletter. We are Congressman Jared Moskowitz on Facebook and at Rep Moskowitz on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. To subscribe to the Congressman's email newsletter, where you can get important updates about actions he's taking in the House, visit moskowitz.house.gov/newsletter. We are going to now move on to another question in the healthcare category from Nikki in Boca Raton. I know that this next topic is very personal to you, Congressman. There have been a lot of threats to research across the medical space, including cancer research. And I can guess that nearly everyone listening tonight has been affected by this disease in some way. Nikki specifically asked, what can we do about cancer funding?
Yeah, Nikki, I mean, they cut the DOD's rare cancer research program. And why is government in cancer research? And then I'll talk about what's going on. Government's in cancer research because the private companies don't want to take on the risk, especially for those hard to cure cancers. My dad died of pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. Screening's a big issue. Government does most of the research in pancreatic cancer, not private companies, because it's a hard to cure cancer. The news came out today that Jerry Connolly, one of my colleagues, passed away from cancer. We've had 3 or 4 other colleagues this year die from cancer. 2 million people get cancer every year. 600,000 of them pass away. This is something that touches, myself to Marjorie Taylor Greene's family. Okay. She's talked about losing her dad to cancer during COVID. And yet Republicans are cutting cancer funding. I mean, this is not the money we're going to balance the budget off of. This is something that everyone should be offended by. And so we have filed amendments. We have drawn red lines. We're doing whatever we can in different funding bills, working across the aisle with my colleagues to try to solve this. I think this is one we might get solved on a bipartisan basis. So I'm hopeful that that funding will get restored at DOD and other places. Clearly, I think DOJ bit off more than they can chew and cut all sorts of stuff, not even knowing what they were cutting. This is not what the American people voted for. Again, the Department of Government Efficiency. Again, tell me how cutting cancer research makes anything in government more efficient. It'll lead to more deaths. It'll lead us to, solving less of the problems. One of the biggest areas in cancer is obviously screening, getting better screening. If we find it earlier, we can treat it. That's, one of the problems. Government was focused on that. And government has solved a lot of these things, and not the private sector, because a lot of these things are lost leaders for a long period of time. So I appreciate you asking that question. Thank you.
Moving on to a question from Robert in Fort Lauderdale. Robert wrote in, the Pride Center is a community-based organization that has been around for almost 32 years. For the past 19 years, we have been providing life-saving services such as HIV testing, prevention, education, and linkage of services. The entire HIV prevention department at the CDC has been dismantled, along with all research and drug studies. Each year, we average finding 5 people who did not know their status into care. This year, in only 5 months, we have identified and linked 7 people who did not know their status into care. What is Congress doing to prevent all of these years of hard work from going by the wayside? My biggest fear is that we will experience a resurgence of HIV, not only domestically, but globally, with the funding cuts of USAID's HIV prevention and at the CDC.
Yeah, no, look, this is an area that, again, I think has bipartisan support, right? I mean, you're talking about, internationally, PEPFAR and the programs that we've done in Africa that have been tremendously successful on saving hundreds of thousands of lives from people who are getting HIV and AIDS. In fact, it was a program started by a Republican and has bipartisan support. Here's another area of something that DOJ got rid of and didn't know what they were doing. You've seen the administration come out and try to reverse this. So the Pride Center does unbelievable work, did during COVID, does every single solitary day. And so we're trying to put that funding back in to the budget. So as the reconciliation thing goes forward, and as we get into the next fiscal year, the next budget, you're going to see new appropriations coming forward, trying to get this restored. That's what Democrats are doing with Republicans, actually. And so while it may take, another 6 months, as we go through that process through September, I do think this area of funding, I'm hopeful, but think this area of funding will wind up getting restored. But again, it shows the recklessness that was done by Elon. But, he's not around anymore. You notice that. If it was so successful, he wouldn't have had to, run away from DC. And so, this was some of the stupidity that was going on when they were just gutting programs. So, Robert, thanks for the question.
Thanks, Congressman. Before the next question, I just wanted to read a quick message from Jose in Coral Springs. Jose wrote in saying that he'd love to join the virtual town hall, but that he will be at the Heron Bay Marriott for the Stoneman Douglas High School baseball team banquet. The Stoneman Douglas Eagles just won the FHSAA Class 7A state championship for the 5th consecutive year. This is a record-setting achievement in the state of Florida and deserves acknowledgement.
Well, fantastic. Congratulations. Enjoy the banquet.
Okay, moving on to our next question, which is coming from Dory in Boca Raton. Dory wrote in asking, it is with great sadness that we watch anti-Semitism proliferating through colleges. What are you doing to address this?
Well, thanks, Dory. Thanks for the question. I am one of the leading voices in Congress, in my party and across the aisle on this issue. I went to Columbia during Passover when those students were being denied access to the library, being denied access to their classroom because they were Jewish. We saw colleges across this country fail to enforce their code of conduct, Jewish students being assaulted because of who who they are. We were told it's possible to be, we were told that, oh no, we're not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Israel. That's what they said. And I would suggest, okay, that's maybe possible, but they weren't. They were targeting these students because they were wearing a Jewish star. They didn't know their position on Israel and the war. And we've seen anti-Semitism explode in this country through social media and TikTok and false information on the left and the right. And so Jewish families across the country are deeply concerned. I'm on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, been always an original co-sponsor. In fact, I worked with Elise Stefanik across the aisle when we saw those anti-Semitic attacks on college campuses, and the presidents couldn't look Jewish families in the face. Those presidents failed in answering those questions that, whether calling for the killing of Jews violated their code of conduct. We're seeing it in Europe, anti-Semitism growing over there. And, just like with COVID, the spread of a disease sometimes starts and is first in Europe, but eventually gets over here. And you're seeing it. The hatred online is unbelievable. I get it. Anytime I post something, I get the anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish hatred. And so, look, this is a responsibility of mine. My grandmother was part of the Kinder transport out of Germany. Her and her sister, parents were killed in Auschwitz. My grandfather, her husband, was the sole survivor of the pogroms in Poland. Aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, parents were all killed in Poland. And so I understand what happens when government institutions fail and anti-Semitism is allowed to fester. But we need all of our partners. We need everybody to get on board. You can have different positions on the United States' foreign policy, but fighting against Jew hatred, we need all of our allies at the table. And I'm doing everything I can here in Congress to call it out wherever it exists, regardless of party. I don't care. We're seeing it in entertainment. Kanye West releasing Heil Hitler songs. Never did I think, for the stories my grandmother told me, would we see anything like that in this country. It's a big problem.
Thank you, Congressman. I know that this topic is deeply personal to you. Moving on to a question from Tony in Coral Springs. Tony asks, do you support term limits? And when will term limits be passed?
Oh, Tony, great question. I do support term limits. When will term limits be passed? Probably never. You're talking about guys here that, they got a term limit themselves. Okay. I mean, no one does that. But I support term limits. I had term limits in the state legislature. Now, we could debate how long we should have, right? Should it be 12 years in the Senate, which would be 2 terms? Should it be, 10 years in the House, would be 5 terms? I think 6 years is too little in the House. I did 8 years, it's 8 years in the state House and state Senate in Florida. But 10 may be the right number in the House, 12 may be the right number in the Senate. But I don't think we're ever going to see those get passed. Ted Cruz has a bill, believe it or not, that I support on term limits, but he can't get a hearing in the Senate, and there are term limit bills here in the House. Republicans have complete control. They could do term limits right now. I think you'd see a bipartisan support. So I do support term limits. It would allow us to get new blood here. No one owns these seats. These are not ours. We're merely renting them, leasing them for the time that, the voters send us here. So good question.
Great. Thank you very much. The next question comes from Joe in Wilton Manors. Joe has written in asking, do you believe our exploding national debt is sustainable? If not, how would you propose to solve this problem?
No, Joe, it's not sustainable. What I proposed is a bipartisan fiscal commission to look at this issue and then make recommendations to Congress and then have an up or down vote on it. Our interest now is $1 trillion a year. We're at $36 trillion in debt, on our way to $50 trillion if the reconciliation bill passes. My Republican colleagues used to care about the debt. That's why they were doing DOGE originally, and yet reconciliation is going to add $3.5 trillion to the debt, and all the bipartisan fiscal groups have said that. And you can see that in the bond market. You can see the bond market responding. Yields were above 5% today. We went to go sell our bonds and had problems doing so. Moody's downgraded us. And so, look, the bill is going to come due. This idea that we can continue to take in $5 trillion a year in revenue and spend $7 trillion is not sustainable. Our kids and our grandkids are going to inherit it. It's going to continue to increase inflation, to continue to make things more expensive. And we can't wait for a fiscal emergency for this to happen. I don't think, quite frankly, we should be raising the debt ceiling by $5 trillion, which is what is in the reconciliation bill. That should be done on a bipartisan basis, at a time to control our spending. So spending is absolutely out of control up here. We definitely need to figure out where we can find more waste, fraud, and abuse, and where we can do cuts. But again, that's not what DOGE did. They didn't do that. They said they were going to find $1 trillion of cuts, and they failed by 85%. And we don't even know if the stuff they say they found is true. And so, look, there's money in departments to find, just like there is, at home in your own budget. And so I think Democrats and Republicans need to get in a room, and I think both sides have to lose to solve this problem. I think Democrats are going to have to figure out some things that we're going to have to save money on, and Republicans are going to have to figure out where we're going to find more revenue. And both sides are going to have to come together to solve that. That's the only way we're going to get ourselves out of this situation.
Thank you, Congressman. And on the topic of DOGE, Dave from Fort Lauderdale has written in asking, is Congressman Moskowitz happy with his involvement with DOGE? And if not, why? And what can be done about it?
Yeah, so look, I got a lot of criticism for joining the DOGE caucus originally, but I joined because, not because I wanted to work with Elon, but I joined because I didn't want Republicans to own this idea that only they care of waste, fraud, and abuse. And also, if there are going to be discussions in a room around a table about cutting Medicaid or Social Security or other programs, I want to be in the room. I want to be at the table. It's enough of staying in our safe spaces. Let's go have the debate. Let's have the argument. I'm not going to hide in my office. But DOGE was a complete failure. The DOGE caucus, which I joined, which is made up of members, which is different than the DOGE committee that Elon ran, only met twice in 6 months. We weren't involved in anything DOGE did. Nothing, zero. They brought nothing to Congress. Okay, so the DOGE caucus is dead. Bury it. It's done. But I'm happy I was there. I was happy that I can speak on it. It gives me credibility to say it was a complete failure, that they weren't involved. They made nothing more efficient. Again, Department of Government efficiency. It wasn't the Department of Government cuts. It was efficiency. You can't name one department that is more efficient because of what DOGE did. Nothing is more efficient. Nothing's faster, nothing's quicker, nothing's easier. We didn't bring in any technology to solve any problems. Nothing. Newark, what's happening there with the FAA is a clear example. What we're going to see with FEMA, a clear example of the failures of DOGE. And so, look, I'm happy to be in the room. I'm happy to be at the table, right? They say if you're not, it's better to be at the table than to be on the menu. And so, yeah, I'm glad I was there. But what an utter failure and a missed opportunity, quite frankly, again, on a bipartisan basis to do this. But that's not what they did. Not what they did. That's why Elon has had to flee Washington.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, we're moving to a question from Kim in Parkland. Kim wrote in asking, what have you or will you be doing to encourage the release of aid to Gaza to prevent the looming famine that is impacting innocent children?
Yeah, thanks, Kim, for that question. I have always been very consistent on this issue. I think you can do both things at the same time. I don't think it's an and/or. I think it's an all the above. I think that you can get rid of Hamas and you can make sure that the innocent people in Gaza, the innocent children there, are getting the food, medicine, and resources they need. Let me reverse for a second. What's going on there is the result of what Hamas has done. On October 7th, and since October 7th, Hamas steals their food, Hamas puts weapons in hospitals, Hamas takes their aid. Hamas doesn't care about their people at all. They put them at risk. They use them as human shields. They're disposable. And Hamas wants these images. They want these images beamed through Chinese TikTok in order to isolate Israel from the world. And so, look, I'm happy of the announcement that was just made a couple of days ago that more food and aid is getting into Gaza. I think that's great news. That's good news. We got to make sure that we prevent a famine there. No question about it. Of course, Jordan and Egypt, they don't want the Israelis to be in Gaza, but they don't want to go in either. Neither do the Emiratis or the Qataris or the Saudis. They don't want Israel to be a force in Gaza, but they don't want to send their folks in there to be a peacekeeping force to push back on Hamas. And so, look, I remain very steadfast on getting the hostages out. This does not end until we get the hostages out. And Israel has every right to defend itself. We have to defeat Hamas. And what does that mean, defeat Hamas? You're not going to defeat all terrorists, but you can get them out of the government. You can get them out as the ruling authority. You can make sure that they don't have weapons. That is accomplishable. But we need our regional partners in the region to help us with that. The Emiratis, the Qataris, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians. And only then can we get to the rebuilding of Gaza. But in the meantime, I am happy that more aid is getting in. I've been on every letter that has been presented to me to get on to talk to the last State Department and this State Department to making sure that we do both, defeat Hamas and make sure that we're getting life-saving humanitarian aid into Gaza. I've been a part of.
Thank you. The next question comes from Elizabeth, who's a business owner in Coral Springs. Elizabeth asks, what steps are you taking to help heal the deep divide in our nation's capital and the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, Elizabeth, that is the million-dollar question. Look, you're talking to someone, I've been a Democrat my whole life, but, look, for 2.5 years, I took my hat off and went to go work for a Republican governor who appointed me to be the director of emergency management. He appointed me again a second time to be on the Broward County Commission. Never lost who I was in any of that, remained true to my values. But I got to be honest. I mean, bipartisanship up here is hard to find. I mean, I passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act on a bipartisan basis. I got members, Republicans in the House, Republicans in the Senate, Rick Scott to sign that bill. Rolling the NRA, passing gun legislation in a red state. So I know how to do it. I have a track record. In fact, there's not a single Democrat in the state of Florida, or maybe even the country, that has the track record that I have working across the aisle. I'll work with anyone if it's going to make the American people or my constituents better. But where are the opportunities to do that up here? I'm working across the aisle, trying to do it on FEMA. That's good. Got me and Byron Donalds in the House, Tom Tillis in the Senate, trying to save FEMA from what the Secretary is trying to do. But you're not seeing it. There's no incentive to do it. We're being ripped apart up here by the gerrymandering that has gone on. There's only 20 seats that matter now in the general election. You're seeing social media podcasts, the 24-hour news coverage. Want to get everyone foaming out of the mouth and angry. Everyone's an enemy or a traitor. Well, we can't work together. And this is not how life works. I have to negotiate with my kids, try to get them to bed or what they're going to have for dinner. You got to compromise every day in life. You got to do that in business. You got to do that with your spouse. Lord knows I lose all the time to my wife. But up here, we have disincentivized that. And we're not going to solve these problems by ourselves. One party is not going back to the debt problem. We're not going to solve that debt. Democrats are going to solve that by themselves. Republicans are not going to solve that by themselves. We're only going to solve that if we can do this stuff together. So look, again, where there are opportunities, I will find them. I am constantly looking for them. I am constantly reaching across the aisle. But this place is becoming more polarized, more divided, and less functional. I'm serving in the least functional House of Representatives in American history. The 118th Congress was that, and then the 119th Congress was like, hold my beer, let me show you how it's done. We have sent the president the least amount of bills in the first 100 days in the last 70 years. And that's because people don't want to work across the aisle. We need you to demand that, though. We need you to say we want to see Democrats and Republicans work together to solve these problems.
Thank you, Congressman. And as a reminder to everyone watching, if you want to follow along with the Congressman's work and his bipartisan efforts to bridge the divide in Washington, we recommend that you follow his social media account and subscribe to his newsletter, which you can find again at moskowitz.house.gov/newsletter. We also encourage you to continue submitting questions to our email.
So
unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time, so I'd like to just turn it over to you for anything you'd like to say.
Yeah, before I begin, my concluding remarks, I just want to say some of you submitted questions that delved into the political realm, and so I didn't ignore those. I'm not allowed to answer them. So those, for those of you, you can contact my office, and I'm happy to answer those offline since I'm in the House building at the moment. And so I know that a lot of you of what we discussed tonight, you can feel overwhelmed, stressful, it can be chaotic, it can be it's that way up here too. I have a little bit of background in chaos, being a former emergency management director dealing with disasters. And look, if you're frustrated in this moment, it's an important reminder that elections have consequences. Republicans are trying to limit our power in the minority. That's why they're constantly changing the rules, believe it or not, changing how we fight. Every time we do something, they change the rule and take it away from us. And so, look, we're still standing up for the policies that Florida families are counting on, and against the policies that will hurt our community. Unfortunately, opportunities for bipartisanship, as I said, are far and few between. The state that Congress in nowadays has made that tough. I said that we're the least productive Congress in decades. And during the last Congress, this Congress, I got to be honest, it's not getting any better. But despite all of the dysfunction that's going on in Washington, it isn't stopping us from continuing to deliver for our district. We've resolved more than 5,000 constituent inquiries related to passports, Social Security checks, VA benefits, and more. And we've recovered nearly $20 million of hard-earned taxpayer money for the people in our district. And my team is continuously working with our local partners to get them the targeted resources to upgrade our infrastructure, keep our community safe, and deliver you the municipal services you count on. So if there's anything my team or I can ever help you with, be sure to reach out, whether to my office in DC or locally in Coral Springs. We're in the Coral Springs City Hall. We're here to help, and we look forward to hearing from you. Until then, thank you for joining this virtual town hall and sending in many questions. By standing united against the harmful policies coming out of Washington, we'll continue to be a voice for the policies and programs that our communities count on each and every day. Thank you for the honor to serve in Congress. It is an honor of a lifetime. And thank you again for being here, and have a good night.
The